This channel is made possible by viewers like you. My viewers, subscribers, and patrons greatly help to keep this channel going. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all of you. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any uploads. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, please check out my Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you'll get access to what I'm working on, previews of upcoming content, and even early videos, along with other tier options for those that are interested. Thank you, and now on to the video. Ever since last year, Sony has been trying to wedge themselves into the retro space through their revamped version of PS Plus. This allowed for a premium tier where players would have access to a library of games from the PS1, PSP, and PS2. This was promising at the start, and while the list of titles was lacking for the most part, it did have a few bright spots, with Syphon Filter 1 being among them. Syphon Filter is a series that has generally sold well for their time, but has largely gone to be forgotten about, underrated, or maybe even overlooked by the masses, especially today. The fans who love it are passionate people that still really enjoy these games. My hope that while the initial list of games was lacking, that it did potentially draw in more eyes to Syphon Filter, since it stood above many of the other options. Part of me wonders if the Syphon games are slowly getting re-released digitally, because Ben still cares, or maybe someone at Sony does. Either way, we have seen many of the games re-released, and now we're able to enjoy the second entry on the PSP with Logan Shadow, now on the PS4 and PS5. There is a group of fans that actually started with these PSP games. Looking back on both Dark Mirror and Logan Shadow, it was honestly really impressive what Ben Studios was able to accomplish on a portable device. Of the two, I do prefer Dark Mirror, and it was actually the first game I played on the PSP, and for a launch title, it's great. There were some pretty good cutscenes, and the action worked really well considering the hardware limitations. When Dark Mirror was in development, Ben was interested in this new Sony handheld, but the PSP had problems of sorts. It only came with one analog nub, which meant that the traditional left and right stick controls honestly wouldn't work. Ben was smart in that it produced a bunch of different control options for the player, and both games were made in such a way that it was comfortable to play on the PSP. When it comes to the actual gameplay for Logan Shadow, it's a nice mixture of stealth and action. You have all the actions that you could do in Dark Mirror, like being able to take cover, a form of the target lock, along with some other nice new additions like being able to blind fire and then take an enemy as a human shield. I really like the addition of the human shield as it helps to keep the game more on the move, or at least provide you with more on the move options. Other gameplay additions are QuickTime events. This feels like the developer trying to implement some type of modern mechanic that was honestly everywhere at the time. Or maybe this was more of a studio note from Sony to include them. They honestly do not really add much to the game. I appreciated the effort, but I think more time could have been spent elsewhere. I know that the PSP games are more built for stop and pop action, but I really miss the option to roll when playing these games, along with the problem solving found in the prior console entries. Dark Mirror and Logan Shadow do feel more streamlined, and at the same time I can understand that decision, as it was probably done to make the smoothest and most accessible experience on the PSP. Logan Shadow saw the addition of underwater sections. The attempt at variety is appreciated, and the exclusive weapons you get to use are pretty cool, like a spear gun, but I could have done with less or honestly none of the underwater areas. It may sound like I'm complaining a lot about Logan Shadow, and I do have issues with it, but as a portable third-person shooting Syphon game, it's really good. And really my only big issue is how it ends, considering we haven't seen a proper concluding chapter, and we are left hanging. If you have another game lined up, then end the prior one with a cliffhanger. But if you don't know if you're gonna get a sequel, it's probably better to provide some sense of closure, while also leaving the door open a bit. Now, as it pertains to the PSP games on the PS4 and 5, I am happy that they are available, and I'm glad Sony recognizes if you had bought them digitally on the PSP, then you don't need to buy them again when the games become available on the home consoles. Now that Sony has been doing this for a while, I am a bit disappointed with their job with it. I really like the ability to save anywhere, along with being able to rewind your gameplay. Both of these are awesome features to have for older titles, and could help someone new get over that hump to try them again. At the same time, they do not compromise those who want to play the games as they were originally intended. But to go along with this, there are a lack of features and customization found within these re-releases. For example, when Dark Mirror re-released, there was no option to map the face buttons to the right stick so that you could aim with the two sticks. You could only select the options that were available in-game. This felt like a huge oversight, especially considering that on the Vita you could remap stuff to the right stick, making some PSP games better to be played on that device. Now after a while, Sony did release an update that did fix this, but I do think that there should be more options while on the Sony console for their games. Now you can play these games on their original hardware, along with other means, and this other means also allows you to customize a lot more. So for the version that you can get on Sony's own console, it should be doing a much better job than they are. Now like I said, I do like some of the stuff that Sony is doing, and I appreciate that they are trying to do something in regards to getting their older titles out there, but Sony really needs to do more. On top of this too, I feel like it's a big missed opportunity to not re-release the Omega Strain. This was the big PS2 Syphon game, and I know that even the fan base can be a bit mixed on it since it moves away from the single-player focused titles of the PS1 games, and goes for a more online co-op experience. Honestly, the game was ahead of its time, and its systems could probably work really well with today's audience. This would be worth giving the remaster treatment, and letting players enjoy the online co-op on their PS4 and 5. But as of right now, it now seems that the Omega Strain will go ignored by Sony. Now I need to get a bit nostalgic for a minute. When it was leaked last year that the Syphon games were getting rated for the PS4 and 5, I was a bit over the moon when I saw this. A series that has largely been ignored by Sony for a while now is finally getting some much needed attention, and I also thought this would be a great opportunity for a new audience to get to play these titles. Since that while the games very much look like products of their time, I honestly find their gameplay to hold up really well. So with all of this news of the PS Plus revamping, and Syphon Filter coming back, it really started to create speculation that maybe a new Syphon Filter was being made. I think now is the perfect time to bring this series back. For one, we need more stealth-focused games in the AAA space. I know that many titles feature light stealth in their games, but we need more dedicated stealth titles. There are rumors that something might be happening with Metal Gear Solid, which would be nice. Tenchu has largely been ignored, and it would be great to see it come back. Ubisoft is making a remake of Splinter Cell, but they want to make sure to capture a modern audience, so I have doubts with it being good. And will they even bring back Ironside to voice Sam? The recent Deus Ex games were great hybrids of being a first-person shooter and stealth RPG. This is one I have a bit more hope for because of the Enforcer group that bought the IP from Square. So hopefully we see remasters and a proper ending to that trilogy. Hitman has been one of the few that stands tall with its excellent games, but now IO Interactive is moving on to Bond, allowing for the Hitman series to rest a bit, which is a good move, but it also means that there is space that could be used for more stealth games. A single-player Syphon game would be great right now. It's the perfect time for it. For those of you asking for a remake, I am not in that camp. The only remake that I would want is a visual remake with the same levels, gameplay, and yes, voice acting from the original PlayStation games. If they did something like the Medieval visual remake on the PS4, I would be all for it. That game was largely kept the same but provided new visuals. As a side note, I am getting a bit exhausted from all the remakes. I would prefer new IPs or sequels to some of these franchises. I don't need you to rehash Syphon 1 and probably do a worse job. There have been some exceptions that have been great for the remake space, but I would prefer a sequel for Syphon. The fanbase honestly deserves it. Logan Shadow leaves our character out there hanging, and the audience just wants to have a proper conclusion. Just thinking off the cuff, I would love a new Syphon game that brings back the design from the PS1 games, especially much of the design from the first two games. I would bring back the target lock and sweeping camera, the level-based structure with new objectives added on while on mission. Maybe add some modern stuff like a light cover system, but if added, I don't want this to turn into a cover shooter. I don't have all the answers, and I'm not a game dev, I just have suggestions. But more importantly, I would love to see the problem solving of the first two games brought back. Give us situations where the player gets stuck for a bit, needs to put two and two together, and feel that satisfaction of being a spy when they succeed. Put us in action situations that are ripped right from great films, but instead of watching them, we are playing them and figuring it out as we go. This type of stuff is going to be harder to do, because much of that AAA design is about hand-holding the player and ensuring that everyone is comfortable to beat the game. I think if they made a new Syphon, it would be good to be within the mindset of those older games, and maybe with some modern enhancements. But the identity of Syphon could not be lost. I do not think this would be an easy task, but if Bend or someone else could pull this off, it would be grand. I am also concerned that this will never happen, or never happen properly because John Garvin and Jeff Ross are no longer with the company, and were a big part why we enjoyed all these games. If a new Syphon is made without them, I think we will feel it in some way in the final game. But I am just throwing ideas out there. How about you? How would you like to see a remake or maybe a sequel? How would you do it if you were given full control? Are you happy you can play many of the Syphon titles on the PS4 and 5 now? Let me know all of this in the comments below. If you're interested in being notified of new videos, please hit the subscribe button and bell. And if you would like to support the channel and get early access to content, please check out my Patreon. All of the links will be at the end of this video and within the description. And thank you very much for watching.